Everybody's still here.
Okay, great.
We're going to go ahead and get started. Everyone, thanks for joining us. This will be the second webinar that we are doing on the Alzbetter program. Close as many Alzheimer's home care leads as you want this year with one program. And we already have done, we've already had part one of this series. So when we get done here today, of course, everyone's going to receive a follow-up email with the playback of this webinar. And we will also include the playback or the video of the first webinar, so you'll get both of them. Now, the third webinar is going to be later this month, or later in July. So we will announce the date for the final webinar, and then you'll have a three-part series total that you can view. So we are going to recap a little bit of the first webinar, just so you have a little summary of what we talked about, and then we're going to send everything to you after the webinar is over. I would also like to remind you that if you have questions, we will take any questions. Gary will be happy to answer them, and you can do that by typing the question into the little questions pane on your little dashboard that you have. So at the end of the webinar, we will go through and answer everybody's questions that have, so don't forget, anytime you want, they'll be in the order of first come, first serve. So anytime you want, go ahead and type a question in, and we will answer them in the order received at the end of the webinar. So with that, welcome to the Alzbetter, the Dementia Care Experts webinar, part 2 of 3. This is Valerie Van Boeven, and now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gary Skoll. He is the developer of the Alzbetter program. And with that, Gary, why don't you go ahead and talk about yourself and some of the things that we've talked about before, and I'll follow along and change the slides. And if I don't, just say, hey, Val, change the slide.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank everybody. Thank you for coming on again. Hopefully everybody's here for their second time. But if not, just a brief recap of who I am. July 21st will mark my 25th year of being in the business, so I've been doing this for a long time. I started out with a registry, which used independent contractors, and then later switched over, and everybody's employed now by our agency, W-2 employees. We were accredited through CHAP and also ran a Medicaid part of our business. We stopped doing the Medicaid and the accreditation, and we simply focus 100% of our business is private duty now. So we are just a private duty agency. So just a little bit about me, and that I've sort of been around for a while in the industry and done all different types of things. So fairly familiar with a lot of different setups. A little recap.
Let's talk about what we talked about on the last webinar to kind of bring everybody up to date who might not have been there.
Sure. So last time I spoke about the need to differentiate your agency, that there's just so many agencies, everybody's kind of out there doing the same thing, and the need to specialize. And really, why I felt you should specialize is that although many of us consider ourselves non-medical, we're really playing in the medical field. You know, we get our referrals from hospital social workers and subacute rehabs. We have doctors' offices that refer to us. And the clients that are coming to us are also coming out of those types of scenarios. So they're really looking for specialists. That's what they're used to looking for and used to referring to. So if we begin to specialize, we fit into the model of what they're looking for. And really, we're not doing that in the home care industry right now. So I really said the importance of specializing. I also spoke about the dementia cases, that they can be very, very challenging. They're going to require extra training on your part, a lot of extra effort on your part, but they're worth it. These are cases that tend to last many months, if not years. They tend to be a lot longer in hours than a non-dementia case. So although it does require a lot of extra effort, it's really worth the effort. I also spoke about the need to have a complete program, not just a training program. You know, we do training with ours, and training is a critical part of what you're going to do, and you do need to be trained, and your caregivers need to be trained. But I think in order to be successful, you need a total program. You need to have activities that are involved, and you need to have support, and you need to have marketing. So I feel that to be successful, you need more than just a training program. And then lastly, I mentioned about our program, that it's an activities-based program. We utilize technology. We have live training and video training modules. We have a program called Music from Memory that I spoke about, and then we also have some specialized activities.
Okay, so before we get into the specifics of your program, I know a lot of people out there have dementia clients or even a dementia program, but they really struggle with this type of care. So tell me why so many dementia programs for home care fail.
Sure. Probably the biggest problem is that when we are in home care, we're going into somebody's home, and we are guests of their home. So we can't necessarily tell them you have to do it this way and you have to do that, versus a facility where a client moves in and the family members that come are guests of the facility. So the facility has a lot more control. So in home care, we just don't have that kind of control. In fact, there's a facility that specializes in dementia in our area, and for the first week that somebody's there, the family members are not allowed to come at all because they want this person to get acclimated. So that's really showing a tremendous amount of control. And like I said, unfortunately, we don't have that same type of control with home care. So we really need to focus on educating the family members and educating the neighbors and educating the people that are involved in the care. And that's really the only way that this is going to work, because if what happens is we walk into their home and they say, well, no, I don't want it done this way, or we do things this way around here. And then a month later they say, you know what, your program doesn't work. Mom's a mess, and you said you were going to do this and that, and you're not doing it. Well, that's because we're not able to implement the program the way it needs to be done. So education is a real big part of that, and that's one of the reasons that you see so many programs fail. But beyond that, I think that there's not enough training for the family members and the professionals. I can tell you that we have, to give you a story, we were cared for a man and lived with his wife, and we had a live-in caregiver, a male live-in caregiver with this particular man. And for the first 3 or 4 weeks, everything was going great. We thought it was the perfect fit. And then suddenly, the man became agitated every time our caregiver was around him, and he just was really having a problem. And we couldn't figure out what was going on because everything seemed to be the same as it was. Nothing had really changed. And so we did our research, and we spoke to the wife, and we interviewed the daughter, and we spoke to the caregiver, and we really dug deep into this to try and figure out what was going on. And what we turned up was that the wife was a very neat and organized person, and the live-in caregiver used to drink water out of a water bottle, but he would sometimes leave them lying around the house in different places. Well, this was aggravating the wife. It had nothing to do with the husband, but it was aggravating the wife. But their relationship was such that she used to talk to him, when things bothered her. She would say, this is what's going on, this is what bothers me, and she would confide in him, and he would listen, and that was their relationship. Except now that he had dementia, things had changed. So as she was complaining to him about what was bothering her about this caregiver, he was now getting angry with the caregiver. He couldn't express his feelings, but every time the caregiver was around now, there was a problem. And it was really hard to put those pieces together. But, that's the kind of thing where having control and educating. Once we spoke to the wife and we told her what was happening and we told her that she had to change, and it wasn't easy, but she was able to do this. But we had to educate her as to how the disease had changed her husband. And once we were able to do that, it made things a lot better. But another problem reasons that some of these programs fail is that the family members and the caregivers, the professional caregivers, the agencies, they don't have a resource to turn to. And where we had a lot of experience and we were able to use that experience and really figure out what was going on here under the scene, most places don't have that. So, that's another problem that happens why some programs fail. Also, as the disease progresses, people with dementia find it harder and scarier to venture out into the world and have new things thrown at them. They simply can't process this. So they require a consistent, predictable schedule filled with activities that are meaningful and appropriate for their level. This is what you find at a facility, and this is one of the things that facilities do really well. One of the problems with home care is that we don't have structure. We don't have a real schedule. We kind of, a lot of times, fly by the seat of our pants. We have a care plan, but that's not a schedule. And the good thing about a facility is they have that schedule, but it's not individualized. So we're individualized without a schedule, and they have a schedule, but they're not individualized. So what we discovered is we need to kind of put those two things together in order to be more successful. So we need to have that structure for a one-on-one type of situation, and that's what works best. So we had a daughter who wanted her mother to get out of the house a lot more. And when I talked about how people get scared because they don't know what's out there, and she really wanted her mother. Her mother had always been a social person and always gone out a lot. But now her mother was becoming a little bit more afraid to go out because everything was uncertain to her. So this was another situation where we had to educate the daughter about the change that her mother had gone through, and that it really wasn't in her best interest to keep on going out to the mall and to these other places that were becoming scary to her. So again, educating the family members is a big part of this. And without this kind of meaningful day that's structured, people tend to get lethargic and frustrated. They get agitated and feel worthless. And just having the structure helps to minimize a lot of these problems. One last reason that things fail is that even if you have a really good activity program set up, and this even happens in facilities as well, as the disease goes along, people become unaware of what meanings necessarily are. So a reaction to something that they're uncertain about a safe reaction is no. So when we try and get them to do an activity, they may not necessarily understand what we're saying, although we think that they should, and they're typically going to say no. So if we can teach the caregivers how to get around this, it's a very powerful way to help people take part in the programs. One more quick story is that we had a client, and the caregiver used to say to him, Mr. Jones, do you want to listen to some Sinatra? And the client would think about it, and then he would say, no. And then he might even ask, do you like Sinatra? And the caregiver would say, well, not really. But the client didn't really understand what Sinatra was. So if there was another way to go about this, either just to put the music on or to say to the client, I really love this music. Would you listen to this with me? And then we turn it on. It probably would have been much more successful. So we've got to overcome a lot of those issues. And some of them are really just home care specific. And once we can get over those, we can do much better.
So I assume your program addresses many of the issues you just mentioned. So can you give us some specifics of your program?
Sure. So our program today, I'm going to go over why with our program we want to understand the different types of dementia, why that might be important, about the different levels of dementia, our lifestyle assessment tool, and then we use activities to build the schedule that I've spoke about, and then what we call our QOL, or quality of life tool. And this helps us assess whether the schedule is working. And then lastly, we have a problems and solutions section. Our program is patent pending, so we follow a specific protocol, and we start with learning what type of dementia a person has, if that's possible.
Okay, so why is that important?
Well, if we look at a few of the more common types of dementia, first of all, we can start with Alzheimer's. And with Alzheimer's, people tend to wander. It's a very common thing with Alzheimer's. So we may need to adapt the home with certain locks or door coverings or the safe return bracelets from the Alzheimer's Association. Then we have vascular dementia. With vascular dementia, people can get emotionally upset very easily. They really don't have a whole lot of emotional control. They can laugh, cry, get angry, all just very easy. Something else that's peculiar or particular about that is that sometimes they can't see things on their left side. So they may be eating, and they'll eat only the food on the right side of the plate. Now, if we don't know about this, we may think they don't want to eat the food. They're just not eating, don't like that particular food. But if we simply turn the plate to the other side, rotate it around, they'll continue eating. So that can be really helpful. With Lewy body disease, now there's a whole bunch of things with Lewy body. First of all, people with Lewy body disease or Lewy body dementia often have problems with movement, similar to Parkinson's. So they may walk with teeny little steps. They may have a funny gait. It kind of comes and goes at times, but they're also very rigid. And because of this, they're a fall risk. So this is something that we would need to be very careful of. And not only that, but when they tend to fall, they get hurt very badly because they're so rigid. So we really need to pay attention to that. Also with Lewy body, they don't necessarily always have the same memory deficit that someone with Alzheimer's has. Whereas somebody with Alzheimer's might not remember what they said 5 minutes ago, somebody with Lewy body dementia may be able to recall what they did yesterday and what they had for dinner, so they seem a lot more alert and with it. But they tend to have hallucinations and nightmares. And the problem is that because we think that they're with it and they're much more alert, we may believe what they're saying about these hallucinations, and it may be accusing your caregiver of some really terrible things. So we really need to know a little bit more about this. Insomnia is another common trait with Lewy body, so they may be up all night. We might need an overnight shift. And another thing that we need to be careful of is certain medications actually have an adverse effect with Lewy body. It might make them very rigid, where they won't be able to move at all. It may make them more anxious, so we're giving them an anti-anxiety medication and they're getting more anxious. So again, very helpful things to know about this. And the last one that we might want to know about is the frontotemporal lobe type of dementia. With this, the people are very impulsive. So they may want to eat or drink all day long. They can gain a whole lot of weight real quickly. They may drink excess alcohol if they're drinking a lot. They may have a lot of incontinence problems. But another really important thing to be aware of is that these people have absolutely no control over things. They can lose control very quickly. So you need to be aware of where their hands are at all times. Because with other dementias, if someone's getting upset, a lot of times they'll give you some sort of warning. With this type of dementia, the next thing you know, your caregiver is being hit or kicked, and they can't figure out why. So it's something you need to be careful of. So obviously, we don't need to know this, but it's very helpful. Our program doesn't diagnose what type of dementia they have. We try and work with a physician for this. So it's a great way to form a relationship with a physician, but you have to find a physician that's knowledgeable. Most physicians aren't aware of the different types of dementia and the characteristics of them. So it's a real good way to form a relationship with the expert in your area that knows about that kind of thing.
You know what, Gary, this one piece of information probably just helped every single person who manages a home care agency or owns one or runs one. This slide right here. Understanding the differences in the behaviors of people with different kinds of dementia, that's a huge step forward for so many who have no idea that or perhaps their diagnosis is even wrong or just too vague. So they may say that someone has dementia, but what type of dementia is so important. So what comes next?
Well, next we use our software to determine the person's current level of dementia.
And what's the purpose of that? So I guess I can see here what it shows, but why you do that?
Well, there's actually several things that we're trying to do with this. Now, there's a bunch of different tools out there that help determine different levels of dementia, and ours is really specific only to our program. It's not a validated program that similar to the FAST scale. The reason we didn't want to use the FAST scale is that certain levels there aren't applicable to people needing care. For instance, levels 1 and 2, I could probably qualify as a level 1 because I forget things all the time. So we really wanted to have a scale that if you were in there, you needed help. So for us, a low-functioning person is a level 1. This is a person that is very advanced. They may be bed-bound. They may be wheelchair-bound. Possibly they don't speak anymore. It's a very low-functioning person. The next level up 2 is they're functioning a little higher level. Level 3, a little higher than that. And level 4 would be a much higher functioning person, but still somebody that needs care. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have what we call our activity pyramids. And this is where it sort of makes sense to know what levels of dementia they are. I only have 2 out of the 4 here, but I'll show you 1 and 4. So with our level 1 activity pyramid, it shows that 60% of their day is what we would call an essential activity. And this is because it takes this person longer. If they're bedbound, in order for us to get them bathed, it's going to take longer to do that, and we probably have to feed them. And everything just takes longer to do. On top of that, they're going to have a much bigger part of their day being what we call a recuperative activity, then a smaller amount of enjoyment, and very little productive and wellness activities. Now, if you go to a higher functioning person at our level 4, it's not quite as much essential activities, although it's still a big part because hopefully they're sleeping at night, so it's always going to be hopefully the biggest part of their day. But they're going to have more enjoyment, wellness, and productive activities in their day than somebody that's at a level 1. And they're still going to have recuperative because, let's face it, this person may be 80, 85 years old, so they're not going to be on the go, hopefully, all day long, although they could. But so we build a smaller amount of recuperative activities in. You have to keep in mind that these are general guidelines. This isn't going to fit for everybody with dementia because it's such an individualized disease. But the whole goal here is that as they progress through the disease, things need to change. We can't have the exact same program from when they're at a higher functioning to when they're at a lower functioning. So that's the whole goal of trying to figure this out. There's a couple other things actually in the next series, in the third webinar, that I'll go over what we do with some of these activities. But in general, this is one of the things that we try and do with this.
So that makes a lot of sense. So you always want to have a balanced day if possible, but the activities that make up that day will vary based on where the person is with their dementia process.
Exactly.
But that sounds like a lot of work to constantly be changing what their day looks like.
Well, it can be, and we used to do this all on paper, and it was sort of a hassle when we were constantly changing it. Right now we use our software, and everything's already in there. So as they change through the disease, the software makes it very easy to adapt that. So it's not nearly as hard as it used to be.
So what comes next?
Well, next we learn all about the person's lifestyle, both their past and their present.
And why do you need to know about their past?
Well, you know, when it comes to dementia, a lot of people start thinking that they kind of revert back to maybe where they were when they were 20 years old or even in their teens. So we really need to be able to know who they were when they were 20 or 30 or 40 years old. If we don't know who they were when they were 20, but they think they're 20, it's very difficult to care for them. So we found it very important to do that. So what we do is we use, this is a picture, what you're seeing here is what we call our lifestyle assessment, and we really get deep into who they were. We ask questions such as who their parents, where their parents came from. Were they from this country? What did their parents do for a living? Where did their parents, where did they live when they were younger? What kind of relationship did they have with their parents? Where did they go to high school? Did they participate in sports? Foods they like to eat, influences, were they in the war, or what kind of things for enjoyment? So we really try and get a whole lot of information. We find it very, very helpful to do this.
And so what do you do with all the information you just acquired?
Well, what we do is there's one of two ways that we can disseminate this to our caregivers and to the families as well. And also I have to say that a lot of times families really learn a lot about their loved ones just because of all the questions we're asking. We'll sit with family members and they didn't realize that mom did this or dad did that, or these are things that they like, and they actually really appreciate that they're learning so much about their parents. But we can do one of two things. We can either print this out. So what you're looking at here is a paper copy of this. So we have an acrylic stand that we put our schedule in, and then we also include this as well. And what this does is it gives the caregivers, as they're going in, so much detail about the client that they're working with, what not to say to them and what they should say and things that they can ask and about their family and all that kind of stuff. So it makes it very, very helpful. Our coordinators don't have to go through nearly as much information when they're setting the people up. And it's also very helpful when we send in a replacement so that that replacement can go in and really not miss a beat. She'll know exactly who this person is and all the information and what they need to be called and all that kind of stuff. The other way that we can view this is we've recently come out with a mobile app. So with our mobile version, the caregiver can actually view this on their cell phone, if they have a smartphone, or on a tablet. So they can, take 2 minutes before they go into the house. They can log in. They can see what's going on, learn all about the client. And it's just a very helpful way that they can review this information.
That's awesome. So what follows this?
Well, the next step is to create the daily schedule, and that's what I keep on talking about is that structure. So as I explained earlier, having a predictable day filled with meaningful and appropriate activities is critical to successfully caring for somebody with dementia.
So what does a meaningful day look like?
Well, a meaningful day, if you go to the next slide, we try and build as many of our 5 different activity types into this day. So our essential activities, eating, drinking, sleeping, productive activities, help them feel useful and productive. It always feels good when you accomplish something, even if it's the smallest thing. So if we can build these productive activities into their day, that's very good. are enjoyment activities, obviously, things they do for pleasure. Oh, you want to go back for one more?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm fascinated and skipping ahead, of course. Of course, now I don't know why it's not showing you the. Hold on. There you go.
Okay. Our wellness activities. These are activities that help stimulate the mind or the body. It could be puzzles. It could be yoga. If they did yoga, it could be going for a walk. And then our recuperative activities, and these help them recover and regenerate. It could be sitting on a porch swing. It could be listening to some music. It could be taking a nap. So we try, again, we work to the best of our ability to match their current level with the types of activities. But a balanced day is filled with different types of activities. It's not just putting somebody in front of a TV or just letting them eat or sleep all day long. So what we want to do with that is we then create our schedule. And by doing that, first, this is our productive activities, some of the questions we would ask. So this is a sample of, it says, do they like to fix things? And we want to know what time of day they do it. Maybe it's not any specific time, but we want to know what time of day they do it, how important it is to them to do that. And we have different levels for that. And depending on how important it is, it determines if it's on their primary or their secondary list of activities. And then a little narrative. For instance, this person likes to fix clocks. So we're going to ask those questions, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get to our schedule. So I think that's the next picture. So this is what our schedule looks like. So this is what we call our primary schedule. You'll see it's very detailed. It'll tell you in the early morning, this is what we do. This is their routine in the morning. Later in the morning, they might want to go bird watching, and these are the activities that they do, and they take a nap around this time of day. And then after that, and so forth. And it might say we need to remind them to drink every couple of hours so they avoid dehydration, or to remind them to go to the bathroom so we don't have an accident during the day. It's not the type of schedule that says next Thursday they have a doctor's appointment. This is a general schedule of what their day typically looks like. So this is what this is great for, is this is really a blueprint for the caregivers to follow. So typically we send them out and we just have a care plan in place. And with that care plan, it may say do ADLs or maybe even, bathe and feed and so forth. And it doesn't tell them what to do throughout the day. So the caregivers are usually left on their own to try and figure that out. And they're dealing with a person that can't tell them what they want to do. So this is really a relief to those caregivers as well as the family. When a family comes to visit, a family member comes to visit, they now have something to do with mom or dad. Oh, I see we can do this. So they look at the schedule, because a lot of times they'll sit there and they'll get real frustrated because mom doesn't want to do anything and they don't know what to do with mom. They'll either get in a fight or they'll just sit and watch TV together. So it's a relief for them as well. But beyond the primary schedule, we also have something we call our secondary activity list. So we're trying to build a lot of flexibility in here, because there's just going to be times when they don't want to do what's on that list, or the caregiver themselves may, just to keep them sane, want to do something that's a little bit different. But like I said before, we don't necessarily want to try new things with them, but we can include a whole variety of things that they already like to do and that they already know. So this gives us a lot of flexibility in that way. So we have our primary and secondary schedules is how that works.
That's amazing. And that, you know what, if I were the caregiver walking into a house and I saw all these options at certain times of day and this was already outlined for me, it's a no-brainer for me. I know exactly what to do to keep myself busy, to keep them busy, and if I can be reassured that this is all things they used to like to do or still like to do, or, and it'll be fun for them. I'm not just sitting there all day long, playing on my phone while the guy's watching TV. I know that there's a whole host of things that can be done, so that's awesome. So
yeah, I can't tell you how many times that we've heard that from the caregivers, how they're just so thankful to have this.
Even if I was a family member and I had this, I would be so thankful to have some kind of, at least a guide, even though I realize it's not set in stone, a guide to say, okay, here are the things that we've come up with based on all the input of the data, and this will really help the care of this person. It's sort of like, it's almost like and I don't want to compare it to small children, but for preschool and elementary school, they like a structured day. And if you have an activity here, 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 and here, that keeps everybody busy, it keeps them active, they're happy, and they're moving forward with their day, and everybody's in sync. So it just it seems like a simple idea, but I've never seen anybody put it together this way. So how do you know if the schedule you set up is working?
Well, that's a great question. And, part of the problem is that, I've said this many times, that people with dementia, they can't express themselves. So if they're unhappy with something, they don't come out and say, no, I don't like doing this, or this is the reason that I don't like doing this. So what we do is we have something called our Quality of Life tool, our QOL, and we use an observational technique. We teach our caregivers how to use this observational technique, and we base it on our primary schedule. So we're looking at how they're responding when we're doing certain activities, and we're paying attention to that, and then we're recording that. So I think if we go to the next one, this shows our mobile version of the QOL. So what's great is that if they have a smartphone, it's right there for them. It literally takes them 10 seconds to record how the person is responding to the certain activity that goes on. They just click it, and they hit save, and boom, it's recorded. So they can just go at the end of their shift, they can literally go through the whole day in about a minute, record everything. And then if you go to the next slide, this is one of the things that we get to see. So as they record this, it shows up live at our computers at work. And one of the things that we can look at is we can see patterns here. And you can see throughout the day here, there's some positive, some negative, a lot of neutral. But then in the late afternoon, we're seeing a lot of extremely negative. Everything, in fact, is extremely negative. So we can probably assume, you know what, this person's probably sundowning. They're having some issues later in the day. So maybe we need to figure out, why are they sundowning? Are they too tired? Is there medication problems? That's one thing that we can certainly do. But another thing is that if there's something that's important that gets done during this time frame, let's say they're supposed to take their meds at this time of day, and we realize, you know what, that's not going to work because they're so agitated, we can't get them to take their meds, we might want to reschedule that for an earlier or a later time, at a time when they're a little bit more agreeable. So the patterns that emerge from this are really helpful. In addition, we're also about to come out probably in about 2 or 3 weeks with our dashboard, and I think that's the next picture.
Nice.
So with our dashboard, what this is going to do is it's going to take all the clients that we're servicing at our company, and then when there is an extreme behavior, it automatically gets flashed. Or if there's certain patterns, it automatically comes up. So our care manager can sit in front of her computer and kind of take a summary of everybody that's on our dementia program. And when there's issues, she'll know about it right away. And one of the reasons that this is so beneficial is that instead of waiting for the caregiver to call up and say, I can't take this anymore, this lady's been killing me for the last week, everything I do, she's getting so aggravated, I quit. The first day that happens, we can call the caregiver up and say, I see you had a problem with Mrs. Jones. Let's go over this and figure out what's going on. Or instead of the family member calling and saying, you know what, Mom is so agitated with your program. I don't know what it is, but we're not real happy about this. We'll already be 10 steps ahead of them, and we know what's going on. So it's looking for a bunch of different patterns, certain days, if there's several consecutive days, and all kinds of things that it looks for. So we're real excited for that dashboard to come out. We think that's going to be a real game changer for us.
You know, it seems to me, just in knowing the transient nature of caregivers across the board, it's not specific to any one home care agency. It's just, you know, it tends to be the pattern. It seems to me like if you are being proactive in calling the caregiver and saying, I see you had a tough day today, let's see what we can do, you know, let's work together to figure out a solution, that not only is the client and the family member happier, but the caregivers themselves. It seems like with that kind of interaction and knowing that the office staff is seeing what's happening and that you really do care, that they may have had a rough day with that client because of their dementia, that it would keep that caregiver on your staff a lot longer because they know you care about not only the clients, but you care about them as a caregiver too.
Yeah, that's a great point.
A huge avoidance of turnover in just, you know, what you said about somebody getting so agitated and the caregiver can only take it for so long, they need a break, and instead of them just throwing up their hands and saying, I quit, and the family being upset, you know, you're hitting this prior to everybody getting upset, and you're actually telling the caregiver, we care about you and we care about the client. What can we do to make your day better? That's just huge. I mean, this is a great program. I mean, even if they didn't have dementia, this would be nice. So,
well, you know what? It's true. We're considering using this for more of what we do, because if you think about it, you know, everybody uses the term managed care, but in our industry, you know, some places some people go out every 30 days, some every 60 days. I've spoken to a couple agencies. They go out once or twice a year to oversee their clients. But even if you're going out every 30 days, you're really not managing the care. You're overseeing what's happening there, but from a day-to-day basis, you really don't know. So for this perspective, we can actually manage. We can intervene. Like you said, we can show those caregivers, we know you had a tough day, and let's figure out what it is. So we can be so much more involved in the care without having to physically run around from house to house every single day being there, but we can have a much better idea of really what's happening in that house.
That's amazing. So the last part of your program is the problems and solutions. How does that work?
Okay. Well, what we've done is we've taken some of the more common problems, bathing or problems with eating, wandering, agitation, all those types of things that we maybe commonly see, and we then have a whole list of possible reasons that these are happening. And the whole idea behind our problems and solutions is that, I've repeated myself a number of times, but it's just so important to get out, that when somebody has a problem, we can't just blame it on the disease. We have to say, is there an underlying cause? Is there a trigger? So we're trying to get people to think along those lines. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that we have, if we look at our bathing problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Is it not going? Oh, there we go. Okay. So you'll see that there's a whole host of potential reasons that this person may not want to bathe. It could be health and physical related. It could be something to do with communication. So we're going to go through this, and again, it's getting us to think, is there an underlying cause? And then we say, okay, if it is, you know, maybe this person is tired, or maybe the process is overwhelming, or, you know, maybe they're depressed, or whatever, anything that could possibly be a reason, we would click on that. Now, you'll also see here that if they wanted to, there's a video that they could actually watch on bathing as well. So if our care manager brings the laptop out to the home, they can sit with the family member, with the caregiver, and review that particular problem. But so let's say they clicked on whatever the possible reasons could be, and then if you go to the next slide, it'll show that we have some solutions. So it'll show, well, this is what the problem could be, and this is how you may want to address that problem. So it's a very handy tool for the care managers. It's a handy tool for the family members, and obviously for the caregiver. So again, we're trying to figure out what the underlying causes are, and this can be very, very helpful.
Wow, this is, now I know why it took you 4 years to put this together. This is a fabulous program, not only for your staff, but for the families. I mean, I think this is just tremendously valuable for them, too. So with that, if you all have questions, now is the time to ask. If you have a question, you want to type it in to your little dashboard, little control thing that you have there. Ask Gary anything. We will be sending out the replay of the first and the second videos that we did for the program, and then the third one will be at the end of July. But I want you to go ahead and ask your questions now. You've got Gary live on the phone. He would be happy to take any questions that you might have about the program itself, about how to get involved. And I'll ask a couple questions that I know that are kind of on my mind and that other people are probably wondering is, you mentioned that it's important to educate the family members, so how do you do that?
Well, we have a training manual that we've developed, and we really use that. We use it to train our caregivers, but we really use it to train or educate, I should say, our family members. Our care manager will bring it out to the case, and she leaves it with the family. But she also tries to highlight the specific areas that might be pertinent to that case and give them something to read. We have our videos that we let the families have access to. So, and the videos, again, are specific to what type of problem that is that they're having. So if it's just bathing, they can watch the video just on bathing. So we really try and educate them with our printed materials, with our videos, and just by going through with the care manager and going over this.
And we've got a lot of questions here, and I think you just answered this one, but I'll make sure that Michelle knows that you asked. Does this program provide solutions for spouses or other family members who are having a tough time dealing with their loved one's dementia? And I think that you just answered that, but if there's anything there else you want to say, that's okay too.
No, absolutely. I think that we really try and work with the family members. We become a partner with them, and that's one of the reasons that is so successful is they need support desperately. We suggest that they go to some support groups, but they need more than support groups. So we do become their partner. I can't tell you how many conversations our care managers have with family members, and the family members literally cry on the phone or in person, and they're just so thankful to have help. So yes, we absolutely work with them.
Okay, and then Ben asked, do you record the completed tasks in your scheduling system as well, or how do they integrate with one another?
They do not. Right now, it does not go into the scheduling system. We are working or trying to work with a couple of vendors. Right now, we are not working with any vendors, but we are in the process of trying to get that to work together. So right now, they are two separate programs, but hopefully that won't be for long.
Okay, and I know you answered this in the first video, the first webinar we did, but Todd wants to know, how long have you used the program?
Now, the program has been an evolution. So we started it about 4 years ago, but at that point we didn't have the software. We certainly didn't have the QOL, and we've just been adding to it over time. Really over, I'd say, the last year is when we've really had the program fully functioning. Although, again, it's an evolution. Our dashboard isn't even out yet, so it would have been great to have had that last year. But really, for about the last year, we've been using it at our agency.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Cindy or Sin wants to know, how do we get involved? And I think that answer is right here on this screen. First of all, yeah, you want to, if you have questions, you can email Gary at gary@alzbetter.com. You can call their offices at 856-281-1200, or you can go to Alzbetter, alzbetter.com, and check out the information there. But certainly,
actually, Val, if you go to the next slide too, I want to show you something.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is very good.
If you go to alzbetter.com and you click on the top banner, that takes you to the section for agencies. And there you can fill out, there's actually something like at the bottom, I think it's called the right fit form, or is this the right for you? And you can fill out a form that'll ask you a few questions, and that gets all the information over to me, and I can contact you after that. Or you can certainly give us a call, or you can shoot us an email, whichever way is easier.
Okay, and if people want to know the cost and all of that, they need to contact you and talk to you directly about that. That's not something we talk about here because it's dependent on a lot of different specifics about their agency, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so let's see. What do you do with caregivers that don't have cell phones or Internet access to use the program? Okay,
well, what we do, and this actually started out as a program not figuring that nobody had Internet access, other than the care managers. The care managers need to have Internet access, and they can either tether their phones to a laptop, or they can get a jetpack, or some kind of hotspot, anything like that that they can get. So they need to have some sort of Internet access to make this work, but the caregivers don't. So we print out the schedules on paper. We also print out the lifestyle assessment. So that's all, and we put it in this acrylic stand. It looks real nice. It's always available for them. And then we can also print out the QOL that they can fill out on paper, and then we can manually enter that into our computer.
Okay, and how do they get that QOL back to you if they can't do it on their phone or a tablet? They just bring it by, or you come by and pick it up, or how does that
they typically will mail that in to us.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But it depends. If our care manager's going out, she'll pick them up. But they'll typically mail out a week's worth of them into us, and then we'll enter them into the computer.
Okay, well, a lot of people had that question. Let's see.
Yeah, no, we can't assume that all of our caregivers have Internet access, so it still absolutely works without that. It's easier, and it's much faster as far as us getting our QOL results from that, but we can't really go with that assumption. Although we're starting to play, we haven't done it yet, but we're playing with the idea of putting tablets into the homes of some of the families that have this program so that the caregivers will then have access to it. And you can always upcharge that to the family as a premium.
Okay, and then let's see, how does the program work with clients that you may only see every other day for 3 to 4 hours? Or do those kind of clients even really need,
we work with a minimum. We won't take a client under 12 hours. And in fact, we have begun upping that to 20 hours for a lot of our dementia cases, because we feel that if somebody really needs this type of service, that we're going to do more hours. But I would say I wouldn't do this for less than 12 hours, but it absolutely works fine because we're leaving that schedule there for the family to use as well. So it's there, and our caregivers, if they're there in the morning, then they do what's in the morning shift. If they're in there in the afternoon, it's all printed out for them what to do in the afternoon shift, and then the family, there's still 24 hours in the day, so the family can fill in the rest.
Okay, and someone asked, how do you match the caregivers with your clients?
Well, that's a great question, and that really has to do mostly with us getting to know our caregivers. I can't tell you that we have a special formula or a test that the caregivers take, and then they, it tells us that it matches with this specific client. But it really is a matter of our coordinators understanding who our caregivers are, and then we put them through the training. And then once we feel that they're trained adequately and that they're appropriate for this particular client, I think that is not necessarily only a dementia question. That's just a general home care question of matching the right caregivers with the right clients. But I will say that not all caregivers are capable of working with dementia clients, and that's really important because as much as you would love to put your whole staff through this, there are just some people that are not appropriate. They just don't get it. For whatever reason, they don't have the patience for this type of person. They don't really understand what's going on, and no matter how you explain it, they still just don't understand. They just don't get it. So I wouldn't assume that just because they have this program it's going to work for everybody, because it doesn't. You really want to get your brighter caregivers or your caregivers that are capable of learning, that that you can explain things to. Because another problem is some caregivers have been working with dementia patients in a facility for many years, and therefore they think they know how to work with them, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily doing it right. But sometimes those types of people aren't open to learning. They think they already know it, and again, that type of person may not be right for what we're doing.
Sure. And just so we can kind of recapping and help everybody understand, if you weren't on the first webinar, the Alzbetter program is for home care agencies, either startup or already, very established. It doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum. If you want to add this program to your home care agency suite of services to differentiate yourself from your competition, that is what this is all about. So I got a couple questions here about, is this a franchise? It's not a franchise. It's probably more along the lines of a business opportunity, but it's really a program that you implement within your own home care agency to help you market yourself better in the dementia caregiving market. Wouldn't you agree with that, or what do you want to add to that, Gary?
No, that's absolutely, you're right on. We license the program out to people. So you get the software and you get all the marketing material and the books and everything that goes along with it. So no, we had initially considered franchising this, but we really feel that we want to get this into the homes of people with dementia. Those are the people that need it, and we thought this would be the fastest way to do that.
Yep, absolutely. And I have a couple more questions for you. Let's see. Sometimes families want to slowly acclimate their loved one with having a caregiver in the home, so they don't schedule that many hours at first. How do you offset that challenge with this program?
Well, again, I think that comes to general caregiving. But I would say that, we tell them, first of all, we explain the program, and, they tend to fall in love with it and they want it. And we let them know that we really do need to have a minimum number of hours. But not only that, but they really need to give that caregiver a break, because I would probably say to them is I would bring some statistics that show how caregivers, especially spouses, tend to have a much higher rate of mortality and sickness, and the stress that's put on them is really unbelievable, and they need at least 12 hours a week to get a break, if not more. But and I do know that sometimes it is difficult to get a caregiver or a client to accept a caregiver, and sometimes you have to trick them into doing that. You know, they're here from the church to do, you know, to help you bake cookies for a cookie sale or whatever it's going to be. So, you know, you have to do what we sometimes call a therapeutic fib to make things work. But there are ways to make that work, and you also have to explain to the family members that the benefits of this and how important it is for their health as well.
So, you know, you're setting the expectation up front. This is how the program works. This is what we require, and this is why it's required. And then there's not as much going back and forth about, well, how many hours do we start with? This is the way it works. If you like this program, we really do know that it works, and here's how it works, and here's how many hours we need. So
right.
I think setting that expectation up front is probably a super good help. Somebody asked, have you ever noticed that the clients get upset that the caregiver is on the phone during the shift recording this data? I think the data, recording of the data should only take a matter of minutes and can be done at the end of the shift. So we're not talking about somebody who's constantly on their phone.
No, and that, you know, it's a great question, because initially I really wanted it to be done as it happened. And again, it literally takes seconds to do. But that is a huge problem in our industry of caregivers being on the phone. And, you know, I quickly, not only that, but the feedback from some of our caregivers was they just don't have time during the shift because their client never sits down and she's on the go constantly. So while it might be a little bit more accurate if you can capture it as it happens, you should still be able to do it at the end of your shift. And again, it takes about a minute to do an entire shift, maybe even less than a minute to do an entire shift and record everything. So, you know, as they're walking out the door, or after they walk out the door, and as they get into their car, however they're getting there, they can very quickly record that, and it doesn't have to, because I do agree that it is troublesome when people are on their phone, and whether they can't differentiate if they're just texting a friend or filling something out for us.
Let's see, and let me talk about, we've got some questions about marketing in that. As far as marketing this program, is part of what you provide when a home care agency signs up and says, we really want to do this, we want to set ourselves apart, you have marketing material and information on how you marketed this so that other people can, you know, copy off of what you did to get it out to their referral sources.
Absolutely. So we provide, it's really a turnkey program. So we have brochures already made up, but we're going to put your logo and your phone number on the brochure, so essentially they're your brochures. We have flyers, we have banners for trade shows. We've got all kinds of stuff that's already made up, and we just put your information on that. And then we also, as part of our training, we have a 14-hour training program when this starts. And part of that training is how to sell the program, how to sell it to care managers and social workers, how to sell it when somebody does a phone call and does an intake, how to sell it when you go into somebody's home and you're sitting there on the couch with 2 other agencies that are also going to be coming in. So yes, how to sell the program is a big part. That's why I said that this is a program. It's not just how to train somebody how to care for somebody with dementia. This is an entire program. The
staff from beginning to end are involved. So
yep.
Is there question is there any problem bringing this to Canada? You're international already.
I don't see why there would be.
I don't either. It's private. Private pay has nothing to do with Medicare, Medicaid. It's just a private pay, program that's a better program than I've ever seen as far as Alzheimer's care. And is there a geographic exclusivity for the program? We know you're going to get this question. This has happened before. So what about exclusivity? Tell us.
Yeah, we give a semi-exclusive type of arrangement. So and that's one of the reasons we need to talk before we can give out pricing. But it depends on the size of your market, and that would determine how many other agencies that we would allow to come in. Never more than 5. So if you're in Los Angeles or New York City or something like that, there wouldn't be any more than 5. And I figure if there's a population of 10 million or 13 million, I'm sure there's enough room for 5 agencies.
Absolutely.
So it depends on the size of your market as to how exclusive it's going to be. So it's not going to be a total exclusive market, but it would be semi-exclusive.
Okay, great. Well, I think that we have been through a majority of the questions, there were a lot, so I want to thank everybody for that. And I look forward to the final series in this, part 3 of 3, and then there'll be a whole suite of videos available on the Alzbetter program, how to get it started, what it means, how it works. So we will be sending out the replay of this video, the replay of the first webinar, and pretty soon the dates for the final webinar. But anyone can contact Gary at any time, Gary@alzbetter.com, 856-281-1200, or go to the website alzbetter.com and look at the very top banner and click on the words that say for home care agencies, etc. So, Gary, thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this. And any last words?
No, I appreciate, Valerie, you setting me up. This is great. We've had really an overwhelming response. We had just a great response from the first one. So you know, you've got a great group of agencies that are out here, and so I look forward to speaking to a whole bunch more people.
All right, great. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon, and look for your invitation for the next and final webinar. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.